Welcome back to another video here on the Bannock Industries YouTube channel. Now, behind me here, we got our 2000 Ford Ranger rock bouncer build we've been working on. Now, in the last videos we did on this thing, we built some trick TMR axle trusses. We got those fully welded out onto our axles, which is good because that gave us what we needed for today. So, right here, that's our 429 big block Ford. We're going to be getting the tranny put back onto it, and hopefully we're going to find we're going to find the engine its place in the frame here. Now I've gone ahead, I've mapped out a bunch of shit. So if you didn't see the 4-link drop video, I went ahead and I plotted everything on Illustrator, kind of did like a CAD drawing. So what we got here going on is that's our chassis. So these are the frame rails here. These are our axles, and of course these are all just center lines. You have upper and then you have lower links. The blue is lower, red are uppers. But what we need to do is we found center on our chassis. I've actually gone ahead, I've marked that here, so I'll show you guys. So throughout our build process, I had the center of the chassis marked out, and this is direct center between the front and the back, not on like where the frame rails live, but that center of where the suspension and the axles are going to sit. So I'm trying to build this thing very center balanced. I want, you know, it's going to be more of a, not a mid-engine, but it's not going to be front, it's going to be a front to mid. So we're going to actually move the engine back in the chassis from where stock would have been, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. But things we need to know: our engine from the front accessory pulley is 29.5 inches. The tranny overall with the T-case on it, 39 inches. And then I just have the yoke separation. So that's from the back yoke to the front yoke. It's a 16.5 inch difference. And that we'll get into a little bit later. Just once we find this, then I'll be able to plot the engine trans on CAD in the chassis and then figure out where our drive lines are going to live and see what the difference is there. I'm gonna try to have like the front and the rear drive shaft very close to the same lengths if I can. It just makes rotational mass, all that stuff, very equal. So we're, you know, yes, you're always gonna have more power going to the back, but we want power coming to the front. And if we can do that in very close to the same power and just have, you know, equal drivetrain loss, kind of back and forth, you know, that's what we're going to want. So I plotted out on our chassis. So from the front, from center, you have a 37-inch difference. That's going to be the separation of the upper links. So take half of that and then take your half of the just trying to figure out what I'm trying to say here. But so our wheelbase center to center axles is 127 inches. Take that 127 inches minus 37 inches, which right here, that's our upper separation. So you minus that out, that gives you 90. You divide that by 2, boom. That gives you 45 inches. So take 37, divide by 2, plus 45, that gives you 63.5 inches from center. And that's our first mark here. So kind of looking at it, because on our axle, we're gonna have our upper 4 links are gonna be 8 inches between the two. And the front of the engine here, we'll take a look here. So this here, we're about 8 inches on our pulley, and then we go to about a foot here when it gets to the oil pan. So we're going to want this between the upper 4 links, as best as we can, just for when it's at full squat. So we have that marked out here. So we're gonna try and put the front of the engine right on this line here. Now, looking at it, like that's back in our engine bay quite a bit. So coming into the cab, sorry about the lighting, but so 29.5 inches is kind of how long the engine block is. That puts us here. So looking at that, you're pretty much behind the firewall quite a bit. That's inside our cab. So we'll see how that works out. I might have to play around with the numbers, see where we're working, but this is just to get it mocked up. But going from there, we'll 39 inches right here where I've marked out, which is pretty much at the back of the cab. That is where our rear yoke is going to be, pretty much right there. So this cross member in the center, that's going to have to go. So I'm going to cut that out here quick. We'll get the engine tranny bolted together, and then we'll get it into place here, and we'll see what we're looking like. So this was kind of foreseen, but we're running into an issue here. So I can't go back anymore with the engine crane. We are pretty much 10 inches too far ahead still, as you can see, maybe 7 or so. But the engine's got to come back more, which we should be able to make work. Unless, you know, we move the front axle ahead some, which is like we might be able to, but the issue I'm having is I'm gonna have to lift it, which will be pretty much directly on this bar here. So getting it into place now is going to be a little bit of work. So I'm going to have to set up some jack stands here, reposition the crane, and then try and get it into place, and then we'll probably just bring the tranny in through the side here. But a little bit of an unseen issue, but we should be able to get this knocked out anyways. Okay, so here's where we're at. We have the front of the engine. It's just being supported by our engine crane here. But I have this set at our line here that we had talked about earlier. So the front of the engine is at the front engine line. Now with that, we went ahead. This is actually kind of a pain to get the engine and trans into place, just because it is sitting so far back. And now just being able to see that, like, here's the dash bar, or like the front at the windshield, and we're probably 6 to 8 inches past that into the cab. So to make this work, the seats pretty much need to be touching. No, they do. Like, they'll sit right against the back here, which isn't good, because when I'm sitting in here, like, my feet, where the pedal should be, is the back of the head. So where we have the engine right now is not going to work, because originally I had plans to have the seats right about here. So we're going to have to move the engine ahead. We're going to have to figure out what we need to do to make that happen. Now, with these lines, this is all based off that like the CAD design. So it was all just in theoretical, like to get our suspension geometry, everything. So now that we have a little bit more of the pieces of the puzzle going together, we're gonna have to modify, change, and make them all work together. Looking at this, I'm gonna just grab a tape measure here. So at 9 inches, we're just gonna make a mark, which this is moving pretty much the whole block ahead, 9 inches from where it's sitting. So that is off this line, 3.5. There's 3.5. And that puts us 7 inches from the axle here. But that's also going off the block. So we're 6.5 inches past that, which would put us, so if we do it like I'm saying, we're going to take it and we're pretty much moving right from here, and we're going to put the front of the engine here where we want our axle to live. But we also have a foot, like we got 10 inches here to here where we could make like our suspension and everything live in front. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to actually get the engine moved ahead, and we'll see where we're at then. Okay, here we go. So we got the engine, it's up more in front. So we'll have to figure out now with the height. I'm pretty happy with how this is sitting for height. It'll actually give us room. Another thing we were running into with it sitting as far back as it was we weren't going to have enough room by the time we did like put a carb on here, then you put your intake, you're like there. And one thing I wanted to do is run a high-rise intake, big single plane, which it'll sit here, and then our carb is going to sit to about here, which will be okay here because we'll do like a top hat, and then we'll run an intake, just a tubed intake, into the cab somewhere, and it'll either suck under the dash, or we'll run like a high, not a high rise, but almost run a snorkel up behind us, just so we have a high rise intake, just so we're not sucking in water, all that good stuff. But things to figure out once we get there. So with this, it's more of a happy spot to put it. It is still back from where like the factory engine sat, but I'm more happy with it here. It gives us lots of leg room in the cab, because you know we able to move our seats a little bit off the harness bar. I still have plenty of leg room, so we can move the seats ahead even more. It gives our firewall more of a normal spot, trans tunnel, all that looks like it'll be just perfect. And then, you know, we'll build a subframe. We'll actually get down here. So everything that you see now will be kind of up above the subframe. So we're going to have something come down and protect all that good stuff. It'll be a little bit to figure out how to do drive lines. So ideally I'd love to run one piece, but depending on where our subframe is, we might have like a short shaft on a bearing and then another piece that'll run off that on the front and maybe on the back, like a steady bearing, front and rear, just so we can get our drive lines out of our subframe, and then from the subframe back to the axle you can have articulation. So yeah, this is kind of where we're at. I got to go ahead. I'm going to put a bar across, just hold the engine up for now using a couple ratchet straps just like we are. But I'm going to go ahead, get our axle kind of thrown into place, just see where we're going to sit, play around with things. And another thing that I'm kind of running off is I was hoping that our axle, like when it comes, it actually would sit up on this. Looking at this now, we're probably going to have like a good distance, and then the axle's going to sit probably level with our chassis there. So you have a little bit of up travel, you know, depending on where our subframe puts us. We're going to drop this lower, just give ourselves more clearance here. It'll make the buggy sit a little bit taller, but we're talking like a maybe 6 inches taller at full like compression. So maybe 2-3 inches higher, 4 inches higher than I was thinking, which really this buggy's going to be low as it is. So if we can get it up a little bit more, it's not going to affect it. Plus, since we have our engine sitting so low, you know, this thing's going to have a really good low center of gravity, and we're still fairly far back. So we'll see what it is. Hopefully by the time, you know, 2 people are in there, we have our fuel cell in the back, we'll be very even. Like, I'm sure this block with the cast iron heads is heavy, but 2 people, water, fuel, goods, and everything else in the back, like, it'll start to add up as well. So I'll put you guys back on time lapse. I'll get some stuff into place and we'll have another look here. So here we go. This is the final look we're gonna have for the day. There is our TMR axle truss. Now, just the way we're looking at it here, this is in place. I've gone ahead. We have the engine where we last had the mark for the axle center line, and then we've moved the axle center line ahead 4 inches. I did that because with looking, we've marked out our 8-inch center. So from here to here, 4 inches, from here to here, 4 inches. Our heim joints kind of just set here in center, angled out to where they're going to be on the frame. Guesstimated for angle. This is probably a little shallow, so they're going to clear where the engine sits. And now the big thing with this is if you look, this is with this thing all the way up. We are going to have the top heim joints on our axle. They're going to be level to wherever they mount on the frame. So the frame right now from there is, I want to say give or take 3 inches, 4 inches higher at the front than it is down here. And we are up even higher. So think, the chassis is going to sit way higher than it is right now. But say it's completely aired out, which it never will be because we'll have bump stops and other stuff to keep it so flat is kind of flat. You know, we're going to be really good. I think like where we have the engine now, it gives us plenty of room inside the cab. Now, of course, we do just have the belly strap on the engine, and I have one strap here holding up the back, one pulling it back, but it gives you good foot room. Everything inside the cab's going to be about normal. The engine, the tranny, it's going to sit good. So I'm really happy with kind of where everything's ending up here. So next thing I got to do is build a bunch of 4-link tabs for the axles. Get the 4 links figured. I also have to get the subframe kind of figured out, where everything's gonna live, figure out the distances, how far they gotta drop, and then we can go ahead, build engine mounts, get the engine into place, get the tranny into place, and then so on and so forth, just keep adding on. But next up, we gotta get our 4 lengths done, gotta get that subframe done, just so we can get everything put in home. And we're gonna be able, if like we have to move the engine back like 3-4 inches, that is gonna be plenty of room up here for clearance, and it won't take away what we have in the cab for clearance. So really happy. But thank you very much for watching this video. If you're new to the channel, please go down below, subscribe, give us a big thumbs up if you liked the video. Leave a comment if you want more info on, you know, maybe something we're doing. But be sure to check out all the other videos on this build and come back next time, because we'll be continuing on.